Hi, good afternoon. Who do we have here? We have Christine, Stahl, and Karen Fischer. Welcome. I'm so glad that you guys would come and chat with me this afternoon. How are you both doing?
Good.
Good, good.
Sun is shining.
Say that again?
The sun is shining.
The sun is shining. That almost seems like a tongue twister. The sun is shining brightly in the sky. Say that 3 times for a warm-up. And Christine, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having us today, Kate.
Oh, thank you. Please introduce yourselves. Who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Okay, Karen.
I live in New London. I've been here 11 years next month, which is the longest I've ever lived in any one place in my whole life.
Oh, you're like me, a little bit of a vagabond.
Yes. Minister's kid and then school administrator wife.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yes, we're well moved.
Well, that makes you a versatile, adaptable, probably more intelligent person as a result.
Well, I bloom where I am planted.
There you go. I love that. Well, good. And what are you up to now, Karen? What are you doing these days?
I'm retired.
For 11 years.
Yeah, I'm retired now almost 3 years. I was a prevention coordinator for a youth substance use prevention grant in Old Lyme through Child and Family Agency. And I was in prevention for about 11 years prior to my retirement. Prior to that, I was a mental health counselor in private practice. So.
Well, you've had some really good experience. So prevention, drug and alcohol, working with youth and family and all of that. Great. And Christine, tell me about yourself. I think you're new to this area as well.
Yeah, I guess I can put myself in the vagabond group as well. I've been living in East Lyme now for 7 years, and that is the longest that I've been in one place since I've been probably about 18. So I've got 2 kids in the school system, and spend most of my time now volunteering. My background is in business, and I spent most of my career in healthcare as a healthcare analyst. So just busy right now becoming a homeschooler, I guess, during the pandemic, and keeping everyone sound of mind. So
that's a huge job right there. And you have a high school student and then a middle school.
I've got high school and middle school. And I just want to say, or take this opportunity to thank their teachers. I will be happy for you to have them back.
Yeah, you loved them and you brought them into this world, but you didn't think you'd be the primary educator.
No, it's a big role.
It is a big role, so thank you. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me. And you both are involved with a group that I'm really interested in knowing more about, and it's called Moms Demand Action. And from what I understand, it's not just mothers who want action, it's dads, it's community leaders, it's probably priests, ministers, rabbis. It's a lot of people. It's not just moms. But tell me what, it's called Moms Demand Action, but tell me what Moms Demand Action is all about.
Well, so Moms Demand Action is, it's a grassroots movement of volunteers, and we're all dedicated to ending gun violence in America. It was founded by a mom, her name's Shannon Watts, and it was founded in 2012 in response to the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School, in which a single gunman killed 20 first graders and 6 adults. And her movement started online, and it has since, over the years, grown out of this sad need that we have in this country. It's grown to a national movement with chapters in all 50 states, and we have over 6 million supporters. And like you said, it started with moms, but it has grown. It's moms, dads, students, all sorts of family members, concerned citizens, and survivors of gun violence. And Moms Demand Action works with our gun violence prevention partners. There's many groups involved in this movement. So we work together with them on both education and legislative initiatives, and we encourage responsible gun ownership.
So,
and work to elect gun sense people.
Gun sense people, good, good. Well, that's quite a mission. And it sounds like you've done quite a bit in the last 8 years. You're saying 2012, if my math is correct, that's just 8 years ago. So in 8 years, and Sandy Hook, we just had the anniversary of Sandy Hook not that long ago. And we're all in Connecticut, and Sandy Hook is just basically up the road for us. So I think it really strikes home for our nutmeg state.
Yes. Well, in Connecticut alone, we actually have, we've got 14, I think, local Moms Demand Action groups. And these really, I think what was a really turning point, and Karen can add to this, but the shooting that occurred a couple of years ago in Florida, in Parkland, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, where we saw the students kind of rise up and find their voice. We saw March for Our Lives. That's when there was a really a large expansion of our movement. And that's when our local group in Southeastern Connecticut was formed. Which is great because, you know, it's one thing to donate and be active online and virtually as we are now, but it's also nice to be able to be the boots on the ground doing the work. And that's what we've been able to do in Southeastern Connecticut since we started the local group.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the things you've been doing at the local level? I know you're busy doing a lot, but just maybe highlight a few. And we have a little bit of time, so just feel free to just describe some of your activities, because I think gun safety, there's a lot of myths around gun safety. Like if I had a gun, I don't have a gun, but if I had one, what are some of the precautions perhaps that I should think about with my gun in the house?
Well, I'll start and Christine can jump in. We have an education arm of our movement of Moms Demand. And we have 2 education programs that we promote throughout the country. And locally, we have been promoting our Be Smart program. Be Smart is an education program for everyone, for gun owners and non-gun owners. And it emphasizes that it is the adult's responsibility to keep guns out of the hands of children, teens, and others who should not have them. And they must be properly secured within a home, preferably.
So what does that mean, Karen? Can I ask about that? Like,
Sure.
what does it mean properly secured?
So ideally, they should, all guns should be locked up in a safe.
With the key not in the cabinet, or the lock combination not open, or whatever.
Right. There are now gun safes that can be opened with a fingerprint, just like your phone can be opened with your thumbprint. There are gun safes that have fingerprint access. And then that's only one person can access the guns. Ammunition must be stored separately, preferably locked separately. Okay. And if those 2 admonitions are followed, then the chances of a child picking up a gun and accidentally shooting themselves or other people, or someone accessing a gun other than the gun owner to take their own life, or to use in a domestic violence situation, all of those scenarios can be prevented if a gun is properly locked up and the ammunition secured and locked up separately.
Okay, so that's part of the Be Smart program, and that's part of the educational arm, you said, of the Be Smart program?
That is, the Be Smart program is an education program. So I should say what SMART stands for. The S stands for securing guns. The M stands for modeling appropriate behavior around guns. So for people who are gun owners, they should be modeling how to properly load, unload, carry guns, so that everyone who can see what appropriate behavior is with a gun.
Okay.
And then the A stands for ask. And many people in our area do not own guns and don't think about asking when their children go visit a relative or a friend, are there guns in the house and how are they secured? We really encourage people to make that ask, along with, you know, my child is allergic to
peanut butter. Are you going to have peanut butter? So
right. And do you have a pool, and other things. It's really important to make that ask, to raise awareness about the importance of securing guns.
Okay.
And also by the more people who ask, the more normalized that conversation is. It hasn't been normalized. It hasn't been something that's been part of conversations before.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up because I never heard that before. And my husband and I hosted an exchange student from Japan a few years ago. And that was the first thing he asked us. He said, "Where's your gun?" I said, "We don't have guns." And he wouldn't believe me. He thought every American would have at least one gun in the house. So I was like, sorry, we don't have them. So, okay, let's go on. The R.
The R is recognize the signs of suicide. And as part of the Be Smart program, we go into what are some of the common symptoms that people exhibit if they're thinking of killing themselves.
Okay.
And the presence of a gun significantly increases the fatality rate of attempted suicide.
Well, I'm sure it's just available so easy,
Yeah.
right? Just
It's
pull the
like
trigger.
80 some percent of the people who use a gun to take their own life do take their own life. I mean,
They're
it's
successful
fatal.
in their attempt to kill themselves, right?
Right. And whereas if people use other means, they are much less likely to die as a result of their attempt.
Okay. And then the T, there's another letter left.
Right. T is talk. Talk to people about being smart. Make sure you do the ask. Normalize the conversations around guns so that we raise awareness.
Very good. Well, those are
Christine, you want to add something? What did I miss?
No, just generally, I would just jump in and say, I think that it's important just for this conversation that when we're talking about gun violence, there's, everyone kind of zones in on one type of gun violence, and that may be based on your own personal experience or where you live. But as a group, we address all types of gun violence. So suicide, as Karen was talking about, which is a huge problem in our country and in our state. I think it's 62% of firearm deaths in Connecticut are gun suicides. So that's one every 3 days. But aside from gun suicide, we are also addressing issues of unintentional shootings, domestic violence, city violence, mass shootings, the school shootings. So it's really all types of gun violence. We're not just, sometimes it's the stuff that hits the media that gets all the attention, like a Sandy Hook. But we lose many more people to gun suicide than properly probably gets acknowledged. So just in light of the Be Smart, I wanted to just, let you know that it's the whole gamut that we're focused on.
Okay, very good. And I think we're going to go back micro and macro in our conversation. And I don't know which way you want to go. Should we start in small steps, like what you're actually doing right now? I mean, you're doing a lot. So just that big, huge list that you just ran through of all of the different things. And I already feel smarter because you explained what the Be Smart program is. It's a catchy acronym, and that really helps us to kind of think about just asking if you go over to somebody's house. And even if a child, a young boy or girl was going to babysit, I think those would be the kinds of questions that they should ask if they were going to go into somebody's house, just to be aware of those kinds of things. So what else has been going on as far as, I know events have been kind of shut down. We've all been remote and staying at home, but what other kinds of things are going on?
Well, I think we're obviously having a lot of Zoom meetings and discussions, and as a state, we've had virtual conferences and days of action, calls to action. I think it's probably a good time to talk about our Wear Orange event, which is taking place now through June. Wear Orange, just to back up, I guess, a bit, it's a national gun violence awareness campaign. It started, I think it was 2013, to honor a 15-year-old girl named Hadiyah Pendleton, who was shot and killed in a park not far from her home about a week after she had performed in President Obama's second inaugural parade. Her friends and family members came together to honor her, and orange was the color that they used, and orange has since become a defining color of the gun violence prevention movement. National Gun Violence Awareness Day is the first Friday of June. So this year, that's June 5th. And usually we have all over the country, we have many different ways of not celebrating, that's the wrong word, but raising awareness, coming together to address this issue. Last year we met in New London. We had several guest speakers. Representative Joe Courtney was there, among others, and it was just informative. We had a very dramatic display of 100 pairs of shoes that were on the steps of the Whale's Tail Pavilion, 100 shoes representing the 100 lives that are lost each day to gun violence. So this year, since we can't meet in a physical space, what we've decided to do is a project called Wear Orange Rocks. So we are encouraging our volunteers in the movement, friends, family, anyone really, to find rocks in their yard or in their community and paint them orange and include inspirational messages that relate to the movement, and then also include hashtags and social media page links that can link them back to information about the movement. So people are collecting rocks right now, painting them, and then they will display them or just place them throughout their communities June 5th through the 7th, which is that National Gun Violence Awareness Weekend. And hopefully people who find the rocks will take the time to learn about the movement, and they can find out more about us in the movement on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Wear Orange Rocks.
And what are some typical messages that people are hashtagging on their rocks?
We're including things like "We can end gun violence." Some of our common, phrases that we use, like "keep going" or "not one more." We're using multiple languages on the rocks. Anything else you can think of, Karen?
No, I haven't started my rocks yet.
I've got my rocks ready to go. So really and there are ideas. So if you do check, if you go to Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and you go to @WearOrangeRocks, or if you hashtag #WearOrangeRocks, you'll be linked into a discussion that can give you the phrases, the paints to use, all sorts of suggestions, and most importantly, you get to see all these beautiful rocks that people who are very creative art. And it's not just rocks. We've had some coastal communities doing shells. So it'll be really nice to see, once we start to emerge from lockdown, to see the rocks and the shells and whatever, all the orange across our communities. And I think even though we're in this time of COVID, generally there are large monuments that will light up orange for Wear Orange Day. So it's not uncommon to see, what are some of the, I'm blanking on places that light up, but Karen, think of some of them, like the Sears building, or New York, Boston, all the major cities will light up their bridges and their buildings and whatnot. So churches usually will join in and use orange lights and that kind of thing to show support.
Oh, good. And I did find a rock, and so I do have a rock. So
oh, good, you got it started.
I painted my rock orange, but I wasn't sure what hashtag or what I should put on it.
Yeah.
So that would be the next thing to do. Okay, so Christine, it sounds like there's so much going on and there's so much information, and you are not telling anybody that having a gun is wrong, or
no.
Go ahead on that.
No, not at all. Our goal is to encourage responsible gun ownership. So we support the Second Amendment, and we just want to make sure that common sense gun laws are in place. And Connecticut really is, one of the states leading the charge on that. We've passed many life-saving pieces of legislation, like Karen mentioned before, the safe storage laws, banning ghost guns, which, if you're not familiar with ghost guns, this is a big concern.
Maybe some people who are listening or will listen to this don't know.
Yeah, so ghost guns can be like gun kits that you put together, or even with new technology, the 3D printed guns, which are undetectable in metal detectors. They also don't have any serial numbers on them, so they can't be traced. So we're trying to get the word out about that, so that other states can kind of reach the point that we've reached in terms of our legislation. So because of all the efforts in Connecticut specifically, we are ranked the 47th state in terms of, so if you're looking at, from high to low, like who's got the highest incidences of gun violence, we're 47. So we're doing a really good job. We're low down on that list.
That's
and
fabulous.
yeah, and that's a correlation to the laws that we've put in place in Connecticut. We have seen over the last 10 years a decrease. I think it's around 24% decrease in gun suicide in our state. And I think you can link a lot of that to the education and the laws that we put in place. Excuse me, not gun suicide, gun homicide. We still have work to do with gun suicide, but we're looking really strong as a state, and we're in many ways a leader for the other states.
Well, that's fabulous. And I know you work really hard with all of this. And what are some things that we should know about that's going on in the legislative session? I know we had a short session this year because of COVID-19. So,
well, I tell you, coming off of 2019, which was an amazing, we passed 3 bills in 2019, and that felt fantastic. 2 relating to safe storage laws about safely storing a firearm in your home as well as in your vehicle, and we also passed a ban on ghost guns last year. This year, we had hoped to pass 3 bills, or at least one of 3. The one we had the highest hopes for was expanding an existing bill we have already. Our existing bill is an extreme risk protection order, which is sometimes referred to as a red flag law, and we basically it enables law enforcement to petition the court for a warrant to temporarily remove guns from someone who is deemed to be a harm to themselves or others until such time that they can appear before a judge. We had hoped that we would be able to expand that so that a family member could petition a judge directly. So you can imagine if it's an instance where you're concerned about gun suicide, you may not want to involve law enforcement, and family members or healthcare workers may want to be able to raise that red flag, so to speak, without having to involve law enforcement. We were also hoping that if a warrant was produced and guns were removed from an individual's home pending a court date, that the individual would be prevented from buying additional guns between the time that their guns were taken away and before the court date happens. Because believe it or not, law enforcement could petition the court for a warrant, take away the guns temporarily, but that person can run out and get more guns before the judge gets a chance to hear the case. So we were looking for expansions like that. So we were one of the first states to have this extreme risk protection order, but it was in the 90s, and now we need to just update it. So we were hoping that that would happen. The other 2 things we were looking at was a bill that would limit the number of firearms that an individual could purchase per month, as well as applying a tax on the sale of ammunition. So everything, of course, is just out the window this year because of course, all of our efforts are on COVID-19, but this is something that we will be looking at next legislative session.
Once things reopen, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sorry, Karen, you must have been having some technical difficulties, but welcome back. We missed you.
Thank you.
I know that you are pretty knowledgeable on the things that we're discussing, so I don't know that Christine said anything that you aren't already aware of. Talking about the legislative sessions and all that. So
right. Christine, did you talk about improving the bill?
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was reading a little bit, trying to get ready for our conversations today. And just like in Chicago, I guess a lot of the guns that are used in the city streets of Chicago are guns that are brought in from surrounding states, so outside of Illinois, that have weaker gun laws, I guess. And so those are the ones that are actually used that result in some of the homicides and perhaps suicides, but I think mostly the homicides. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. I'm from the Midwest. I'm from southern Wisconsin, part of my vagabond days, and I'm very familiar with what's happening in Chicago. The majority of the guns that are used in crimes in Chicago come from out of state. Indiana has very weak gun laws. Relatively, Wisconsin laws are weak. Many of the guns come from the South in the terms of the trade. and the gun trade. Also, I remember vividly a story on I have some background noise distraction. A story of DePaul University students going to gun stores in Indiana and then coming back to Chicago and selling the guns on the street. Prevention in Chicago takes on a whole extra layer than what we do here and we are fortunate in our area not to have to deal with a whole lot of street gun violence.
Okay, so let me ask though, as far as Connecticut is concerned, how do we compare to perhaps New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, some of our neighbors? How do we compare to surrounding states and maybe Vermont? Maybe maybe up in Maine, maybe there's a little bit more hunting up there, so maybe the gun law, I don't know, maybe the gun laws are a little bit less strict than what we have here. So how do we compare?
Christine, you want to take Maine?
Well, I'd have to pull up the data on the rankings. Rural states are going to have different challenges than we have in Maine. You're not going to have necessarily the city violence that you're going to see, but there's still going to be issues of domestic violence and suicide. The biggest problem, even so, I would say the first thing is children are gun violence in the United States is the leading cause of death among children and teens. That in and of itself is just so sad.
Right.
In rural states, though, that the issues that they face are different, and there's a different culture there. Maine, it's a gun culture, it's a hunting culture, and kids can be familiar with guns, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that families are just because you grew up with guns or you know guns doesn't mean you're practicing that be smart behavior. But so every area is going to have slightly different challenges. So whether you're in Chicago and you worry about the influx of guns from other states, or if you're in a rural hunting community and there's issues of suicide, because especially now or post-COVID with the economy not doing well and the jobless rates. We know we're going to have a spike in both suicide and domestic violence issues. So it varies state by state, exactly, where the issue is. But I would say that one thing we need to keep in mind is that we are working individually as states, and Connecticut is doing a good job, but we are only as strong as our weakest neighbor. So when we look at what we're doing at the state level, it's fantastic, but we also need to keep our eye on the prize, which is at the federal level. And we came so close this past year with trying to attain background checks on all gun sales. We wanted to close the gun show loopholes, and we wanted to make sure that anytime anyone purchased a firearm, they had to pass a background check. And it passed the House of Representatives, and it never, Mitch McConnell would not call it to the floor for a vote in the Senate, and that's where that stood. And there is wild support across the country for background checks, because it does not deny an individual the right to a firearm. It just means that we want to make sure if you have a criminal background, or you suffer from mental illness, or if you've had a restraining order against you by someone for any reason, there's a red flag, so to speak, you would not be able to just take a gun. And we also want to make sure that there's a cool off period. So if you have to go through a background check, it's going to take just a little bit, a hot minute, so that people aren't just quickly running off to go get a gun so that they can, settle a score or whatever. There's a bunch of reasons, but there's wide support. The majority of Americans support a background check, and that is not a red-blue state issue. That's not a Democratic-Republican issue. That's just common sense.
Maine laws are weak compared to Massachusetts and Connecticut laws, New Hampshire and Vermont also. And I do recall reading a study about Massachusetts crime guns, and they were largely coming from those three states. So Connecticut has some of the strongest gun laws, and that was accomplished after Sandy Hook. And then we passed several laws since then.
Well,
And
Go ahead.
laws do make a difference. They absolutely do make a difference. We have data that absolutely shows that.
Supports that. Good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about COVID-19 because we are in unusual times right now. Like Christine, you said you are a homeschooling mom, so to speak, you know, quote unquote, like,
Quote unquote.
because that's not really what you intended to be doing right now. And your kids intended to be jumping either on the school bus or being gone for most of the day, not with you. So tell me what's happening with COVID-19. I heard that gun sales were up. Now, is that just, oh, you're nodding, Karen. I'm right about that.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Some of the most guns ever have been sold in March and April. There was a significant increase. I don't have the exact percentage.
Is that
but
locally, nationally?
nationally.
Yeah, the FBI actually did. They've done, I have the numbers here. It's so gun sales went up in March according to the FBI. They did 3.7 million background checks on firearm purchases just in that month of March, which was that was the highest recorded number of background checks in any month. And they've determined that translates into about 2.5 million guns being purchased in March, which is an 85% increase over sales in March of last year.
That's huge.
And we don't know how many of those people have actually gone through a gun safety course. And in many states, no gun safety course is required at all. There's no licensing. You just go in, buy a gun, pass a background check, and that's the extent of anything that you need to do. So there's a lot of untrained people out there, a lot of people under great stress. And we know from some of the local data that domestic violence has definitely increased in our area. I think I have the data here. Safe Futures calls for help increased 20%. In Connecticut, the domestic violence hotline increased by 7%. I believe this was in March data. And nationally, domestic violence incidents have increased by 35%. So we also look, sadly, at a likely increase in gun suicides as well. People are isolated. They're under a great deal of stress. Isolation is a risk factor for increased suicidality.
If you could elaborate on that a little bit with your background from your work previously, or your work that you've done historically, the things that lead up to perhaps the usage of guns and how this all kind of evolves. Maybe talk a little bit about that. I heard also that liquor sales are up during COVID-19, even though incomes are reduced, activities are reduced. That's another thing that's going on. Maybe talk about that for a little bit.
People who maybe were social drinkers before are perhaps drinking more to the point that they're getting drunk, inebriated, and the combination of being under the influence of alcohol or any drugs and the presence of a gun can lead to some pretty bad situations, including people being killed or taking their own lives. It is also that kind of links everything together, and also with loss of jobs, causing people great deal of financial stress is also a problem, both in terms of domestic violence and suicidal thinking.
Well, lack of self-esteem and lack of what to do during the day, no schedule, no opportunity to shine or be who you want to be, kind of thing.
And feeling despair, you know, that everything's out of our control, and there's very little we can do about it. I know people are applying for unemployment, and once they get it, there's some good news with the recent laws passed that unemployment benefits are a little bit more than they haven't been in the past. But people can't get unemployment benefits because of the overload on the state systems. that handle the unemployment. There are people going, what, 6, 8 weeks now with no income whatsoever. And some people didn't even get their $1,200 check from the federal government, which was part of the aid that was sent out to people.
Mm-hmm.
People are lined up at food banks who've never ever had to do that before, and that's an ego.
Oh no.
So we lost Karen.
Oh, Karen.
So I know that my husband and I were over at Karen Share the other day, and it's a busy place. And I know the HEMA, the place in New London, the food bank over there, the Gemma. Yeah, so those are busy places, and I know that there's a lot of need for that. And there's actually going to be food passed out at St. Agnes Church, I believe, this afternoon. So, and our schools are doing a fabulous job of providing meals to our students. And they said that, we're really reaching out to help the people
I
who
would say a lot of our volunteers, since there's, like legislation being delayed and us not being able to meet, I think many of the people that are part of our organization have kind of found other ways that they can reach out, things like organizing, food bank deliveries and, volunteering. So I think there's a lot of people trying to do good, even though some of our gun violence prevention efforts have not, we've been stalled in that. We've kind of been able to, as a group, focus our energy on other things that we can do in our community, which is important. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've been seeing some people posting things like, perhaps there's been more break-ins and talking about that. So, and I guess a couple of cars that have gotten stolen. So all of these things just make us think, yeah, it's an unusual time. So anything we can do to help save lives, save people, help people to stay safe. And I like the idea that you guys are all about the prevention and providing the gun safety for people who want to use guns.
Yeah. Well, and another big thing that I think we do too is try to work through some of the misinformation that's out there. You can do it with COVID-19 too, but the same is true for the gun violence prevention movement.
What's a myth that you like to
discuss? There's what has always bothered me about any topic is the fear to discuss it, to think that something is too political to have the conversation, or whether it's having a conversation before you send your child over on a play date about asking whether or not a gun, if they have guns and where they store them, to think that that's not good etiquette, or it's too political, or when we talk about bringing programs like Be Smart, which is something that Moms Demand Action offers, or other programs like Start with Hello, which our gun violence partner Sandy Hook Promise offers. We want to bring these types of programs into the school as preventative efforts, just like we bring other programs into the school systems that relate to wellness and suicide prevention and bullying. For some reason, these issues around gun violence are always sensitive because no one wants to appear political. And I think that it's important that we have these conversations. It shouldn't be political. Organizations like ours that offer, and the education piece is completely non-political, and I think it's important that we encourage our representatives and our superintendents and our mayors and selectmen to have these conversations and to make it feel more comfortable in our community, so that we can do more for our community. And we can prevent tragedies before they happen. And I think that this is going to be something we're really going to want to talk about once this pandemic winds down, for all the things Karen was just discussing, because we know that we're even in the shelter of Southeastern Connecticut, we're still facing issues of gun suicide and domestic violence, all sorts of concerns. And, guns just make everything, more severe. So I think we need to have that conversation. So we try to spend a lot of time starting conversations and letting people know that organizations like Moms Demand Action, we're not against Second Amendment. We have no issue. Our members, some of them are gun owners. We encourage gun owners to join us. So
of course. And they need to, because they need to understand that you're demanding the right kind of action, and probably the kind of action that they would support. Because of all people, they want to be able to preserve their ability to be able to maintain that gun and possess that gun. So
Right.
if they have that option, I'm thinking then they would support you because you're trying to help them to continue that, but in a safe way, especially for the people who don't understand guns or the danger of guns. I
Right.
think any wise gun owner would say you have to be careful and you have to be smart about it, right? That would be the
Yeah.
first thing.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And many times we have conversations, when we do have the opportunity to have conversations with gun owners, even if they're members of like the local, gun clubs, sporting groups, we find that we all have more in common than we thought we did.
Of
Um,
course.
and sometimes, granted we're from Connecticut, and but like Karen said, she lived in the Midwest. I lived in Iowa for 6 years. I've lived in Maine and Vermont, very big hunting communities. I've got many friends that hunt. Guns are part of their family tradition, and that's fine. We just want to find ways that we can keep those traditions alive and well, but also safe. So.
Right. And I think we understand it probably more than most people do, just because we are so close to where Sandy Hook was, and that wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you would like to bring up as a topic or something that I might have missed. I like your red shirt.
This is our Connecticut specific shirt. It's
I like that.
Action. I would just encourage anyone who is interested in learning more about gun violence prevention to go to so we're on Facebook. There's a chapter for every state. So no matter what state you're in, you can find your chapter. So Moms Demand Action Connecticut, and then you can be connected with the local group. If wherever in the state you live, you can get involved in your local group. And also if you'd like an easy way to get involved, you can just text the word ready to 64433, and you'll get more information about Moms Demand Action. And if you want to skip right past getting information, you want to just jump into committing and being involved with things like phone banking and text banking and all that kind of fun stuff, you can text the word commit to the same 64433. And then I'd also like to give a shout out to Students Demand Action. Students in high school and college across the country have chapters all over the place. There's one at East Lyme High School. There's several others throughout the state, and any students that want to get involved and hooked up with their local group, the future is yours. So just text students to the same number, 64433. Students are really involved, even virtually right now. Their focus tends to be on getting their seniors and kids over 18 registered to vote.
Oh, that's wonderful. Get out the vote. The
important thing you can do is let your voice be heard. So that would be, So I would encourage anyone who has any questions to reach out to us. We're easy enough to find. And if we're not the right group for you, we can find another group where you feel comfortable, whether it's education or legislation, whatever your background is. We have volunteers that are, lawyers, healthcare workers, they run the gamut, teachers, parents, grandparents. So everyone brings something really vital to the table, whether you want to just be a volunteer or you want to step up into a leadership position. A lot of great people.
Good networking and a way to develop friendship at a deeper level. I'm thinking if you're new to the area, or even if you've lived here a long time, you might want to have a different group of people to connect with, and this would be a good way. And my feeling is that if you're feeling desperate, if you've gone through a hard time, and COVID-19 is a hard time, you always feel better, in my opinion, if you get involved and meet other people who want to do similar things.
And I would say too that one thing that Moms has is a really strong survivor network. So if you are a survivor of gun violence, and by survivor doesn't necessarily mean that you were the victim of the shooting, but if someone close to you was, or if you were in a place where there was a shooting, you too are a survivor, and there's a network of people and mental health services that we can hook you up with through our organization. So reach out for that as well.
Well, that's really nice. So you could be the parent of a child who took his life, or you witnessed somebody who shot somebody, any level of gun violence that, and it doesn't even, it could not even be like a shot. It could be like with the back of the gun where they hammered you or something like that. Anything related to that.
Yeah.
Well, okay. This has been very informative, very helpful. Is
Thank
there
you
anything
for-
else, Christine? I think we have to,
No, that was great. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you about this.
I think we just need to remember June 5th through June 7th. We should all
Yes.
get
Yep.
out and look for orange rocks. Wear
Yep.
orange between now and June 7th, or just between the
So
5th?
find your rocks now and then distribute them in the community in time for the weekend of June 5th through the 7th. Really, any time is great. And just make sure that you put a hashtag or something on your rock so people can have a reference. So either at Wear Orange Rocks or hashtag Wear Orange or wearorange.org. You can check out those places.
Okay.
And you can follow us on Facebook, see what other people are doing, get some great ideas. There's some very crafty, not me, there are very crafty people out there making beautiful rocks.
Well, and it would be a good activity to do during this time.
Get
But
involved.
school's not in session, and I mean, we're meeting virtually, remotely, but you know, school is in session, but not really. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks again. Good to see you, Christine.
Thank
And
you.
look forward to the next time when we can have coffee.
Okay, sounds good. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.